Well, you know, it's not getting much response to that. I read the book.
I know. How much can I add to this?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that McNally Robinson is located here on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We're delighted to have all you folks here, both in person and virtually, for the launch of the latest poetry missive from Mr. Dennis Cooley, Bodyworks. That's out through the University of Calgary Press, and you may applaud wildly at his publication. Just a few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. So there will be a reading from up here, and then there'll be a conversation that will take place at the stools to my left. Following that, there'll be an opportunity for you folks to ask questions. If you're physically located here within the space, just put up your hand and I will rush dramatically over to you with this microphone. Not a comment on your ability to project your voice, just to ensure that those watching at home can hear you. If you are one of those lucky people watching from home, you can also feel free to write any questions or positive comments you have for Dennis into the chat, and we'll be sure to pass those along to him as well. The only thing I will put in your head about signing procedure for right now is that we'll ask you all just to remain in your place for one moment at the close of the event while we safely transport Dennis to a table just beside the cash desk, and then I'll summon you all over so you can get books signed. I'll have additional details on that portion of the evening at the close of the event. But for now, Bodyworks. There's a great blurb from the University of Calgary Press. I'm going to read that very briefly before we get started. Rejecting the simplicity of transcendence for a nuanced examination of mortality, time, illness, of the things the body promises and the promises the body keeps. In Bodyworks, Cooley is unafraid to challenge the eternal and the certain. These poems are humorous, intelligent, and poignant. Bodyworks is essential reading for anyone who lives inside a body that lives within this world. I was just telling John Weir a little while ago that Dennis is an event with Dennis was one of the first events I ever hosted back at McNally Robinson in Polo Park. He was reading from Seeing Red at that point. And I just thought, who is this incredible human reading in front of me, just embodying this bizarre character of Drac with such humor, intelligence, and emotion at the same time. And that turned me into a bit of a fanatic. So I'm completely thrilled every time we get a new volume from him. And I'm particularly delighted to welcome him back behind a microphone. So I'll introduce your host for this evening shortly after Dennis's readings. But Dennis himself is a founding member and 3 times president of the Manitoba Writers Guild, founding editor with Turnstone Press, and professor at St. John's College at the University of Manitoba. He has lived his creative life on the prairies, where he has been a poet, publisher, teacher, critic, theorist, anthologist, reviewer, organizer, and of course, a mentor. Please join me in welcoming Dennis Cooley.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. You should add to the record, or whatever other accomplishments I have, is I'm a friend of Roger Léveillé. I think that should be added to the record. I'm very happy, excited about this book from the University of Calgary Press, and everything that has happened with them has been terrific. So I wanted to say that at the launch. That editing, the design, publicity has been especially fine, and I'm so grateful for what they have done. Thanks also, of course, to McNally Robinson, who, unlike any other bookstore in the country, holds these grand events so well, so often, so supportingly. So we're very privileged to have them. So thank you to you for coming out. It's good to see some old friends that I haven't seen for a long time, and other friends as well. So I'm going to read to you a few of the poems from this book. I hope you like them. I had fun reading the book, writing the book. I hope I have fun reading the book. Okay. I have to find the list. My list has gone astray. Well, good Lord. Okay, I'll do this by memory. What's it? Okay. When I wrote the book, it came partly out of a couple of medical traumas. So in some ways, those were the impetus, or the most immediate impetus. So the interest goes way back before this. I published a book called Soul Searching 30 years ago, probably, in which I wrote favorably of the books that are the bodies, the distressed and neglected and wild bodies. And sometime after the book came out, somebody said to me, "You wrote a book about soul, about angels too, didn't you?" But here we go, for the time being. I have read many times and long drawn on a book called The Origins of Almost Everything by Bill Bryson, whom some of you may know as a travel writer. This is a grand, wonderful book. And I perhaps shouldn't tell you this, because if you actually do read it, you'll find out that I've taken everything from him. But this poem in particular does draw on him. He's a wonderful writer. They blundered into us and make us their own particulars, their known familiars, perilously unaffiliated and in no way benign. When it's over, fooling us into believing once upon a time we were the one and only one. They will have their way. They always leave. They want to break up, run off with something or other, disassembling me, making up another story, pure alchemy. Being unconscionably fickle, they're off for some bit of fluff that's not us, and that's it. That's it for us. We are history. We are goners. Our hopes of sticking together dashed. The whole affair completely mortifying. They have their fun, their little fling. They have their way with us, our rank and trembling desires. I had been several years ago building a bookshelf in a room which we had converted out of a garage, and we turned it into a fancy room. And I was constructing bookshelves, but unfortunately I forgot it was in the ladder. And I stepped out to pick up a screw. And the next thing I knew, I was on my back with a broken hip. So here's a poem about that. It was the height of everything, surely. Things were looking up. The very month so light was the morning. He felt a spring in his step. The morning in solicitude, the birds in their sweetness steeping. The sweet stakes of living slipped out of the vertigo they called spring. How calmly she and the back hoiking colors prod I gaily out of the ground. The ladder was halfway to heaven, the world veering open. He thought it was the very steps of comedy. He stood upon and felt a tingle in his body, the hurry of things in the air. He was putting up with nothing. He was putting up bookshelves, and they would flood the room with music. His a bold and visionary move, the professor. No hesitation, setting up a splendiferous place where a barrage of sunlight arrived and brightened the glass, splashed in wax and the smell of grass. He could merely have fallen in a light shower when he lost his balance and toppled, if he had known to watch his step when the world is jogging past. It is then he falls, wham, onto the cement, rams his ankle, shin, knee. He ups and breaks his hip. How unseemly, unbecoming falling down he is, getting behind, further and further in arrears, having lost his every dignity. Had thought to end up standing on his own 2 feet and on an occasional I am. I am, he said, therefore I rhyme. Ergo, I go eager as a long ago I am to the laughter. He would not take it lying down. So shaken was he when it dawned on him, he would take the fall for it. Poet in name only, he would be by the muses forsaken and forever move in slow and drastic measures. Seismic. If where we wait in our lives, we felt the allure of where they might have gone, places we fear to go or hope to land, someone else we could have been. When we feel in the earth a small shiver we never knew, we knew or would recognize, perhaps a God who says he, she loves us, a filament that burns on the cloudiest day and with a small warm light, the beautiful heartache we always wanted. But the body, I like to read this one. And you'll indulge me, you'll laugh a little bit, even if you don't think it's funny. But the body. But the body, happy to be body, the body one sunny day gives itself up, stands up from the computer where it was made to sweat and stiffen next to the window. Here, body, come on, boy, let's go, come on, boy. Body perks, promises of air and emotion. The body stops to get a smell. Come on, boy, let's go. Needn't worry. The body follows the leash of his love. They're buddies now, creatures of evolved, the green and woolly world, snuff, snuff. The poet and his body go deeper and deeper, further and further. Body talking to itself, talking itself out of its snit. It does not fear ticks, the body. Its cold nose sidesteps the little steaming piles that other dogs have dumped in relief and greeting. They wend their way into the warty forest. The German trees, gummy and roused, are waiting down the shaded paths. Rustle, rustle, leaning toward them. They want to get the poet alone, where they can spray him in the face. He belches poisonous gases, which the trees, grown trembly, inhale a long, deep gasp. They sway in delirium. But the body, let out, it will not let down the poet. Takes him down, yes, to the tennis courts. The body longs to bounce on the balls of its stupid feet. Body thinks it is still young, wonders if the poet still loves it. It huffs and makes whimpery sounds. Imagines it too could be whacking balls all over the place. Body thinks it could make a run for it. It should fling itself with a rattle against the chain mail fence, where it can cling like a bill collector or a disappointed soccer fan. And a true Winnipeg poem, this is called The Relic. About 4 or 5 years ago, I heard in CBC an announcement. I hope this doesn't offend anybody. This poem, I don't mean it to be offensive. An announcement that some religious group was bringing a saint's hand to Winnipeg as part of a religious event, observance. And so I got the poem about this that picks up some of the historical details and then plays with the notion of the relic. Okay. The man in the radio said he would give his right arm to look it in the eye. They could see the time was at hand, and so they played the hand they were dealt. It was a hands-on operation all the way, even for those who dragged their feet. There was no sleight of hand, there was more to it than meets the eye. When the tour got off on a solid footing, the student had everything in hand and hadn't the heart to turn her back on anyone, not even the backsliders, people who were feeling a little down at the heels. But the student was hoping the hand would be a shot in the arm once they set the foot in the room. Even so, some wondered, would the left hand know what the right was doing? Everyone knew the arm, which had left Rome only a handful of times and had kept an arm's distance, soon would be so close at hand you could put but should not hold or touch it, hands off for you. If you got close, you could be a relic, in good standing too, 4th class, quite probably. You should be near the steady hand that had shook the hand of St. Ignatius, that had reached out and touched other hands warmly, a lifeline you could feel in your heart. The student from Ottawa had to watch her step. She kept it at hand on her carry-on and feared it stuck out like a sore thumb where it sat in the seat. The student didn't want the arm to get off on the wrong foot before she flew it back on the end of her wrist. Organizers did not want to get caught flat-footed and were glad to find no one raised a hand, certainly not the handful of skeptics who hadn't a leg to stand on, who for sure didn't want to go to hell in a handbasket. They would feel like heels. Their doubts didn't amount to a slap on the wrist. That is why they stuck their necks out. They pulled it off. Everyone said it was a hands-down success. You got to hand it to them. It was a miracle, people agreed, how well things were handled. It showed the perfect touch. And this piece is called Le Pétomane. Probably again not originated in something heard in the CBC. Do you know what that word means? Pétomane. I mean, it's a serious question.
Which one?
Yeah, le pétomane.
Yeah, the pitoman.
Yeah.
Yeah, the farter.
Okay. Well, you spoiled everything.
Fart-o-man.
You spoiled everything.
I'm sorry. He was a fartiste.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Le pétomane. This guy did exist historically. He was a great, greatly popular, renowned in France. So here's a story about him that does pick up several of the details of the figure. Some wait for the gods. Everyone waits for the pétomane, who did not admit impediments and did not frit away his talents. Hail to him, wise spirit, who looked on tempest and was never shaken, stood behind his loaves of bread, and with an ease that endeared him to priest and republican light, leavened them with life. The vapors he had released in them by the seat of his pants conducted an orchestra, learned to blow at a candle. Oof, happy birthday at 2 paces. Let the winds blow high, let the winds blow low. Hear them wherever they go. To Le Moulin Rouge, where having got his second wind, he released the fine particles and clouds upon the air he enthusiastically sounded. Cannon fire and thunderstorms, and farm animals spoke hiss and grunt in strange languages through him. This as he was performing in the silent film. His was no silent and joyless expression, and so with remarkable ease and gusto, he, patriot, played La Marseillaise, and later could be found putting on airs to the amusement of prince and king and country and Sigmund Freud, who by word of mouth had got somehow wind of him before, dispirited with the slaughter in World War I, the pétomane retired to run a biscuit factory in Toulon. Across the line. What it is to be living in America's attic, a bright cloud of snow, a windy blindness, stray dogs sniffing. These are the particulars of North. Small creatures who at night scratch initials and scribble graffiti on the inside of your skull. a tick stuck in the brain. What it is to live where cold clicks at the pane and sticks in your eye like a pick. What it was to go across the line over the 49th parallel, or what we called a 48. What it meant to know the boundary was the medicine line that protected the Dakota Sioux, and that far to the north in summer solstice, the light never quite disappears. Unread by those on the ground floor who do not notice the ceiling on their days or the faint scuttling on the top of their dreams, who do not feel a shiver from the draft when talking to ourselves we come down the stairs. We are watching our steps, knowing you will not know who we are, but you will know that we have crossed the line, that we were there. We are here, that's us, hissing yellow letters in the snow.
Page 100.
Page 100?
Yeah.
Is that what you want?
Yeah.
100, page 100 is called for, ladies and gentlemen. Seriously?
Yeah.
All right, give it a go.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is called listen.
Yeah, it's dirty.
You and I both know it is time to get the lead out completely necessary to act with aplomb. To be blithe with blithry, also fealty, also. Nothing wrong with your secret and sludged up heart, the result of a faulty and ill-kept carburetor. Nothing that an oil change or a new spark plug a good tune-up wouldn't hurt. No need to inhale so deeply nor to swoon the fumes of your own exhaustion. I'd be pleased to hear you idling behind the door before it swings open with a rattle, and there you are. A new ease, a marvel of transmission, this satisfying glissade of sleep. Just got some more requests. I'm going to read a couple here at the end, and then we'll have a conversation here. Quite the whopper. This one came from a class I was teaching once many years ago. And this is the speech that the student made, and the way she gestured. Called quite the whopper. Right elbow in left palm, forearm straight up. Shakes the forearm back and forth as if it were a cudgel. That guy, he had a wang on him that long. And a girl can't be too careful. Nowadays, you can't be, she says, you can't be too careful, you know, or ever get too lucky. And he returns. This too is stolen. This one's stolen from my daughter, who gets the best line. But I will acknowledge it. I did not steal it, really. He returns. She was not surprised when he said each breath at night caught him off guard. He heard the air when his chest moved. A ship rose in bubbles that squeaked against each other. Wet cracklings that could be candy. Peanut brittle softly breaking. He heard wheezy sounds in the throat. Small gasps in the stern. The complaint of lock and tackle. Noticed the sounds of rigging at night. He listened to the sea, gasping into the gulf of gas bay. Could not miss the scratch of wind and rope, the sound of cardboard breaking. Once he thought of plates in the cupboard, remembered scraping noises a film makes over wood, a lot of creaking in his thorax, the breathings of a coping saw. Listened until his daughter said, "It's a cabinet maker you've got in there." Okay, so let's get on to. Thank you so much, Josh. We need our,
You gotta come over here.
okay, we need an introduction for you, don't we?
Oh, and I'm right here to offer my notes.
He's been listening. He's been listening.
Thank you so very much, Dennis. I now have the pleasure of introducing your host for this evening. Born near Central Park in downtown Winnipeg, host J. Roger Léveillé has published 30 titles in a variety of genres that have been recognized by several awards, amongst which are the Manitoba Arts Award of Distinction in 2012. He was a journalist and producer of Radio Canada for 25 years. He was also a longtime literary director of the Léveillé de Play and secretary of the Winnipeg International Writers Festival. An international symposium on his work was held in 2005, and he was professor and writer in residence at the Université de Rennes in France in 2009. He is an officer of the Order of Canada. Please join me in welcoming both your host and Cooley once more.
Thank you. I had heard all those things you said about Cooley, but I don't even know where he lives in Winnipeg. This gentleman phones me up from time to time, invites me out for a drink in whatever city bar he could find. And I usually accept the invitation and we talk about anything, anytime, anywhere, right? Which is a little bit what we're going to do today. You've mentioned or alluded to in your comments before your readings, many of the things that interested me. I took copious notes, but I understand that some of the poems were published before. But I was wondering over what span of time were they concentrated? Like, did you have a lot of body parts in the freezer over the years, or is this concentrated over more or less a short period of time?
Yeah. That's always a good diverse collection.
Well, the Frankenstein type thing, you putting all the pieces together.
Yeah. A couple of them are very early. There's one that came up from that book, the Soul Searching, that came out in about 1982 or something like that. So I took that one and rewrote it. A couple others came back from earlier collection, but mostly they're new poems. The ones that are newest in this collection are the ones of the first section, section 9. Most of those were written just in maybe half a year before the book came, before the publisher got the book.
You still had put all the parts together. Some stuff you kept in, some things you took out.
Well, yeah, that's one of the hard parts. As I'm sure you found.
No, I just put anything in, but it's different with you. You're perfect.
All right. This is kind of yelling. Slyness here. It's hard to know how to put them together. Barb Shaw, who's here, worked with me on a manuscript one time, and I had the poems. There they are. And what I thought might be an interesting order, she says, no, this is no good. You got to get these organized so the book will be interesting to your readers. She kept after me, and she worked it around. It actually made some kind of sense, and it really helped enormously. But it's hard to know how to organize books, how to put them together. I'm not particularly keen on organizing them. I kind of like the idea of saying, here they are. Put them in whatever sequence, but I can see for readers it can be handy to have a little clutch of things where you start tuning. So good, these are the big poems.
Yeah, right. Well, at least you put the poems themselves together. Admirably.
They do put themselves together, I guess.
Yeah.
Language does that, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I find in this book in particular. There's a clarity of vision and a clarity of ideas and a clarity of expression. And I don't know if you have it talks about all kinds of things, but always humorous, but there's a kind of a sense of contentment coming out of all these body works and everything. And I don't mean to say that you're self-satisfied about the book itself, but do you not have that feeling of everything's coming together, all the pieces, you know, like the Frankenstein monster, everything's glued together and actually moves and walks and talks. And you're contented with it.
Yeah.
It's a book of a feeling of great contentment.
Yeah, good. I think the expression, I hadn't thought of quite that word, but I have the feeling often, I have with this book too, to say, oh, that kind of feels right together, kind of fits somehow. It's almost like you're holding a slinky like this, you know, that sense of how the weight that moves through your hands and your body, it kind of feels right. But I have a very liberal sense of cohesion and connectedness. One way of thinking about this, which you may or may not find compelling, not sure I do either, is to quote the American poet Ginsberg, who said, the mind is shapely, right? That the idea being that whatever comes from somebody is going to have its own coherence. It'll bear the signatures of that person, the obsessions and hang-ups or preferences or fantasies or incapacities or whatever that the stories acknowledge or not acknowledge or whatever are going to be there. So that you're going to have your imprint in what you write. That you probably have to struggle to say, I need a style or a signature or whatever. It's going to be there. You write about what you care about, what excites you, it's there. Your poems will have a mark of your writing. I think. I don't really.
Well, I do, and on top of that, and you alluded it in your readings to some of the people you borrowed to. So you are recognizing in those people things that are within you in a sense. It's like constellations in the sky that you're matching up. I mean, you mentioned Shakespeare in there. There's some poems that you probably lifted right out of Gertrude Stein, as far as I know. But so tell us a little bit about that borrowing and that family link with other people and how it works and why you use it in the poem.
Well, part of it is just reading. You know, if you read around, you find things that excite you or interest you, or you find memorable, whatever. Sometimes it's a matter of that you memorize, maybe even when you're very young. That we used to say in our time, in English at least, you memorize something you know by heart. So you memorize it, but it's clearly saying something more than being able to recite the words. You're saying that you've internalized its tones and rhythms, your sense of it. That it's become very much a part of you. You know it by heart. So part of that, there's phrases that are there. These are pearls for his eyes. Full fathom, father. No, I can't quote it. Full fathom deep your father lies. So they're there with you, all your life. And in this case, I'm writing a poem about my dad. And there's that line.
And it sends the reader, of course, if they read the line before, if they know it, it sends them into that other universe. Like the one you read, let the winds blow high, let the winds blow low. Well, it sends the reader just in a sense outside the poem that he's reading, but it's just adds the richness. If you mention the name Shakespeare in your poem, then the whole other world is open just by linking Shakespeare to that little part of your poem. It's like doors to the universe is what they call it now. Those snake holes to the universe.
A more academic way of saying that, less lovely then, is that all writing is imitative.
You're right.
And that you're having a conversation with all the people who have written, even the ones you have never read. That's those things are out there, and you may know of them in a fairly direct and immediate or personal way, but you're drawing in what's there, or it's speaking to you. Perhaps a better way of putting it.
But isn't that exactly what happens? At that time, you become the eternal writer in a sense. You're in touch with all those things that have gone on before. And they're not just somebody else. You become it, or it becomes you.
You're not speaking on your own or by yourself. In fact, if it was such a thing were even theoretically possible, it'd be a pretty dreadful, poor thin rain. Right? I mean, you borrow, and it's a richer thing for borrowing.
Yeah, you borrow, you copy, you change.
Yeah, imitate, you make fun of.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this book obviously is full of making fun of. And there's a lot of cliches in the book. Many cliches because there's so much humor, right?
Yeah.
And I've always thought that in literature you can take a cliche and like resuscitate it because the cliche is so cliche, right?
Yeah.
But what happens in your book, it comes alive.
Yeah. Well, you make them literal.
Exactly.
We read them and interpret it. So I know what that means. So I know what that means.
Yeah.
But what if people with a relic are going to lend you a hand?
Yeah.
So he seems a little strange.
Right.
Yeah. So you revive them by restore them to their kind of original in some ways.
Yeah, when you were listening, I was listening to you mention yang, and in French, Jean, where yang comes from as well.
Yeah.
So you know a lot of French. I didn't realize you were so good in French. But another thing I enjoy in your books and all your books is, I don't know, we'll call that, let you talk about it, but it's the mechanisms of your verse, the verses that you truncate, the double commas, the parentheses or the brackets that open but never close, and those things are just as important as what somebody would call the line of poetry, right?
Yeah.
When did you come into these things, and how did they develop?
Well, I think when I first became aware of them was from Robert Duncan, and then a little later from E. Cummings. But then, of course, later there are all kinds of people using some of these devices. But part of it is seeing the page as a visual space, which of course it is. But if you're single-minded about this as a verbal act, then the page may as well not be there.
Exactly.
But it's there as material, and you can use it for meaning, expression. So you can distribute ink on the page, right? So you move toward a kind of graphic art. What happens if you use different ink or shape it differently or use it to different purposes? You start even moving it off a lettered world, even, at which point you're now probably into graphic art. But those borders are kind of interesting. But I think it's also pretty that, there's a page, if you run that column, that has its own visual attraction because it's neat and kind of reassuring, right? And maybe even somebody regular lines down here might find reassuring. But the more open spacing, using ink more fluidly, more speculatively and speculums, I guess is what I want to say. You can become able to do a lot more things to suggest hesitation or wonder or confusion or hesitation, anger, emphasis. You can get a whole lot more expressive power out of the visual use of the page. But it's also had to do with pacing as well, verbally. I mean, I work very strongly both ways, strong pressure on the visual page, but enormous commitment to a speaking voice. I love those oral voices.
Right. And the breaks, like the breaks you make in your verses, it's like they're written for voices in a sense, to a certain extent. And the disposition you just talked about, they're like notations on work for a musician or the
I don't know what you find of this, Roger, but I'm finding that what I'm doing isn't very systematic or constant. That sometimes I'm scoring doubly. I want this hesitation here, so the line will look as if it's intact, at least for the moment.
Right.
But I also then want it suddenly to open into the next line, and it'll be working against itself even sometimes, at least in both directions. And you can't, when you read it out loud, you can only get one.
That's right. And
Yeah.
when you read it,
Yeah.
when you're reading on a page, you
Yeah.
go, it's like going to the superstore and getting 2 for 1. Great offer.
Yeah.
There's I've written down here because I didn't learn it by heart, but there's a quote from another of your books that I enjoy very much, Abecedario.
Yeah.
And this part, I've put it in my next novel that's coming out.
Good.
Because I really love it. But I'm asking, I'm going to cite this because I'm just wondering if to you it's not actually a sort of a principle of your poetry or of the art of writing. You say, move this page wherever you want. Why should it be here at all? Why not take it right out if you think you are better off without it?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a principle of writing. Basically, you can do what you want. I mean, you work hard at it, you bring it up together, but there's no really rule. The imagination kind of dictates to you what you should do. You can do whatever you want, right?
Yeah, there's a feel for it. Again, it's kind of being read to the body. You're kind of rhythm here of attention or stress. You're holding this. What is it then? But yeah, you can move those things around. It's not very systematic, but I work almost with instinct. Part of it is you internalize. I've been writing for decades. You develop a certain sense of how you might pace yourself through a text, or maybe characteristic rhythms that you maybe don't even altogether realize. Certainly ones that you favor, the ones I developed doing it. Repeat.
You used to write, you're known for that, what's called the long poem. You've written long poems, some so long that some readers haven't finished them. Have you given up on that?
You all know the Samuel Johnson comment on Paradise Lost. He said, few could have wished it longer. No, I often think that in some ways this is a long poem.
Right.
Because I think of them as interconnected and interesting and pretty flexible ways. That these are body works. Poems, body works poems. And here they go. Here's another one. One of those ones.
Yeah.
So
What about the foot?
yeah,
Tibia or not tibia?
that's very hard to write that one. The foot. I got a poem called The Foot.
Yeah.
And for several years it was called The Light Foot. Some of you, well, this is a line from Robert Duncan. The light foot hears you, the dance begins. Is from the poem, beginning with a line from Kindred, Robert Duncan poem. And the poem is so facetious and irreverent and kind of corny that I can't do this. I'm not going to keep this. So I just turned it to the foot. But it takes all the parts, the bones in the foot, and riffs on each one of them.
Well, basically, to say you can put anything you want in a poem.
Yeah.
Poetry, I mean, sometimes there's poetry in poems, there's poetry in the world, there's poetry in novels and in art. But basically, you could use just about anything. I think you'd agree with that.
Well, yeah, what I'm looking for is language is a lie.
Exactly.
And so if you were to tell me, Cooley, you are a bigger father than I feared or knew, that poem you first read, a couple of those weren't poems at all. Perhaps they're not. I mean, they have prose rhythms, many of them. Are strong in narrative. That poem called Return, is that what it's called? Body Returns?
Body Returns, I believe, yes.
I mean, it's clearly a prose narrative, but it's filled with all kinds of crazy little stories of the drunken or German trees, ambushing the poet.
There's one I'm trying to find. Maybe I should put my glasses on.
Yeah.
There's one I'm trying to find. It's like a childhood poem. When you and your buddies out in the field there.
in the field.
Yeah, picking up parts and things. It's just.
That's it comes from a very old poem. That's the body parts.
That is
Body
body
parts.
parts. That's a great poem. Yeah.
Yeah, that goes a way back. It's a parody of creation now. Yeah.
I guess we can say that the meaning and the sense of everything comes from, I mean, the words you choose, the way you put the words together, you're saying on the page. Everybody can say this is, I feel really bad, this is hurts, this is terrible.
Yeah.
But when the meaning comes out out of the words themselves, that's when you have real poetry.
Yeah.
We're not doing Hallmark cards here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why did you get interested in pictomano, the art of the fart?
Well,
Why did you get interested in it?
Well, just to breathe. I mean, if you're interested in body poems, body works.
Yeah.
The body's at work, and so here's this wonderful story. What a gift!
Yeah, exactly.
This guy who's just such a supreme and proud farter.
Yeah.
He blows out candles at 6 feet, and he performs music concerts at an aristocracy of Paris. He runs his little bakery shop where he's filling his bread with gas. It's a gift. You know, how could you not accept that gift? Part of there's a sense that you take pleasure and excitement in things, right?
Yeah.
You know, like a kid in many ways.
Well, this is like very much like a childhood book, I find.
Yeah.
Maybe that feeling of contentment, because I mean, unless the child gets hurt, he's always 100% into what he's doing. Everything is great. Everything comes, all the parts come together, even if they're all imagined or made up.
You're playing. You're curious. You're having fun. Yeah. You're intrigued. You're absorbed in what you're doing.
Do you ever, because we talked about boring or copying other people in that, like you just Google stuff and find stuff, say, oh, this is good, you put it in and you add it on. You build
I sure turn up information that way.
Yeah.
And I check all kinds of things that way. Saying, okay, I've got a snail. What do I know about a snail?
But then you find new stuff and then you got to change your poem.
Yeah. No, you do research and you say, man, I could do this more interesting way.
Yeah. Or you find out that Shakespeare talked about the snail and you say, oh, geez, I don't know that or remember that. I got to do.
Look at yeah. So if you keep reading and you out of curiosity, you hit things, say, that's wonderful. And it sets you off.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Do we have any questions coming from the audience? Yes, please.
My friend, my name is Alan Gardner. I was in, I think he was a professor then, and he was a person with a really, I wouldn't say wicked, but what he talks about and how it has a strong feeling about what the words like. And I got this book years and years ago, and I heard you were coming to town, and I said, I'm going to take this book. I haven't had a chance to read it all. This is Bloody Jack and the Kravchenko thing that I thought was pretty interesting. And so it's nothing long. It's two very quick things. So this would maybe be somewhat inviting, but by Mr. Cooley. We'll see if it's something that, I'm just taking it two lines. Okay, are we ready to go? Here we are. Here April mails of furrows vacant show, cold bumping through, floorboards slowing in the legs, slow molten more. The drones graze, the car choking on rusted plugs. Lord, forgive us our manifold sins. Cold into the joints, auguring like grain. It's my name here, but I'm going to use it anyway. Gardner in the back gazes like a pig, jiggling, sits on the giggling in all his knees and elbows. Giggles, jiggling smart. Hey, Gardner, watch it, buddy, giggling. So this came up. I had not seen this before, this particular part. And I said, I got to get in on this. My wife will smack me anyway. I just adored what I heard him in class. and things we do in the hallways and things we talk about. So I've met, and Dennis Cooley, when I heard he's coming to town, I was thinking, okay, right here. Thank you for letting me do this. I don't have to run right now. No. Pretending she's not my wife.
Any other questions? We only have about 10 minutes left. Yeah. Barb.
Dennis, having been a student and an avid fan of yours and having read almost everything, I couldn't help noticing or remembering. I think you've had a long love affair with the body. I remember all kinds of wonderful poems in different collections, especially the bum poem, which you read to us when I was a student. The vulva poem, there's a few of them. So I was wondering if you could just comment on that, because you had a very long career, and this feels like a wonderful culmination of that. And I'm sure you'll have more body poems too. Oh, was there a question?
See, good. I agree with you. And I'm pleased that you made that observation. That the serious thought in our culture says that the body is inferior, or disappointing, or ephemeral. I think this is the only body we got, and I think, and lots of other people think, this is the only life we got. So maybe we ought to enjoy it or respect it a little bit.
It's the only vessel we have, right? So travel with it. But in talking about all those parts, it's very postmodern in the sense that one of the ideas anyways behind postmodern writing is there was no hierarchy, there was no high writing and lower, like a graphic novel, that would be really hard. Or cartoons, that's down there, and then prose, and then finally the poetry and using the body in that sense. There is no greater thing in the universe. Everything has its particular part. It may stink, it may become decrepit, but your writing's not becoming decrepit. But the body may become decrepit. Parts have to be replaced. You fell off a ladder. How's the hip, by the way? How's the hip?
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. So that's one of the nice things about this book. And it talks about ordinary things, a lot of simple things, and they become magic in a sense because they're appreciated through the poem.
Yeah. The
poem makes them appreciable.
Yeah, and I try to work constantly with simple, concrete language. So other than in humor or mockery, I hardly ever use polysyllabic Latin words.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the magic of the book. There's gravity in the sense of sometimes the subjects, but there is always levity. You always have this sort of gravity, levity thing.
Kind of lightness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Too many people. Let's not go there. You looking for your book? Want to finish off with reading something?
Well, I go ahead. If I don't find this, then there it is. I found it. Dropping light.
Yeah, go ahead.
Reaching out to touch his wife, she wasn't there at the time he yanked through his sleeve the scarf that he dropped on the way back. The bodies we hold in casual delinquency as a matter of light occupancy, as if time did not go all the way through, as if we were not fireflies in a jar or the breath of gravity.
Yeah, absolutely. Your writing makes us stop and appreciate all the little things in life. Obviously, fireflies are magic for children throughout their whole life. You put them in the jar and you find out the light goes out really quickly. So you open up the jar and throw them outdoors and hope they survive. But no, your writing does that. And maybe one last comment. I don't know if it's that interesting to the people here or not, but the way you break up the sentences or words. It reminds me a lot of the Kurishi in the Japanese haiku. At the end of the second verse, where everything sort of seems to be cut off, and then in the third verse, magic happens. And it's like the way you work the words like that. It's like you have little haikus happening throughout, you know, I don't know, 40 line poems, and that is just fantastic. It's superb.
I never thought of that.
Yeah. Because that's what happens. You were talking about, you cut up a poem, a verse, and the verse kind of stands by itself, has a meaning, but actually continues on the other line, and then so there's another meaning.
Yeah, yeah.
This is exactly what happens in the haiku. And all of a sudden, oh, the poems are full of whoops.
Thank you for
They're
that.
great, yeah.
Oops.
Very good.
Was that the dramatic final word?
I don't know. Anyways, I'll just finish off by saying, when I came back in 1981 from, I guess, a 7-year sabbatical out east, I discovered an anthology that he put together called Draft. I mean, I didn't know the gentleman at the time, and he had put in some French poetry of mine in there. There was no reason to do that. For some reason, he picked a few poems that I had written out of thin air and put them in there. And I appreciate that forever. And I'll finish off by saying if somebody in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, should get the Arts Award of Distinction from the province, it should be this gentleman, Dennis Cooley.
Thank you so much, Rosé. Thank you, Dennis. We will now be moving along to the signing portion of the evening. But before we do, I should point out that it is truly a month of cooley. So if you are free on April 27th, Groundswell is teaming up with Hard Thread Collective to present Bloody Jack, which is Cooley's collaboration with Michael Matthews, who they previously worked together on a beautiful collection of poetry and photographs called Gibbous Moon. And so this is premiering on the 27th. So go to Groundswell's website for more information on that. So it's appropriate that Bloody Jack came up this evening. I would like to thank you all for your attention, for your questions, and for your engagement. We will be moving along to the signing, so we'll just safely transport Dennis to a table, and then I'll let you know when it's time to come on over. We have copies of his latest book at the table. We also have copies at the cash desk, so find a way to get a book in your hand. You can get it signed before you pay for it. Just please do pay for the book. Otherwise, thank you so much to Roger for coming on board and having this conversation with Dennis. Thank you to all of you once more, to the University of Calgary Press, and please join me one more time in acknowledging Dennis Cooley.